Good afternoon, Maverick traders. Welcome to the Currency Recap. Joe with you here. It's December 5th. We are moving into a Thursday. It's crazy how quick this goes. We're already in December. Well, let's see what we got to talk about. You guys know how this works. I'm going to take a look at some of the news of the day. If there's anything out there that's kind of worth discussing, we'll take a look at the technical analysis of the overall markets and see if we can't share the trades with the community. As always,
disclaimer. This video was created for professional Forex and crypto traders. Maverick Currencies is a proprietary trading firm that employs professional traders around the world. Our traders trade firm capital and keep 70 to 80% of profits they generate. All trades and analysis in this video are for professional traders only. If you are interested in becoming a professional Forex and currency trader for Maverick, click the apply button in the video description. Let's break down what happened today.
Moving into the market analysis, you're going to see that we actually had kind of what I would expect after the U.S. markets broke out into newer highs. It's kind of this revision or kind of an area of just, I refer to it as meandering. Well, let's just get into the news of the day. So the U.S. equities pause after breaking into new highs. We discussed this over the last few days, an ascending triangle pattern there. I'll draw it again when we get there. Lots of euphoria, lots of excitement, lots of opportunity. So people putting money to work in situations where they think it will kind of pan out going into the end of the year. So a small uptick in U.S. unemployment claims. Powell came out yesterday and had a little bit of the Fed minutes, and it was almost a little hawkish. The words "a little" came out saying that he did see expansion and growth a little more than expected, along with some kind of sticky inflation. But they are still in line with their expected cut in December, and they're not going to change anything because they believe they're on track. So the markets didn't really react to it. But when we see a little bit of an uptick in unemployment claims, okay, that kind of pushes against the strength that we saw yesterday. It's this really funny thing that so far really hasn't impacted the markets. So what do we have coming up? So we have more unemployment numbers due out tomorrow for both the U.S. and CAD. We'll see what that does and the effect it has on the currencies. But what happened today? Not a lot. I do believe the U.S. dollar dipped a little bit because of maybe some of the worries of the unemployment that increased. But keep in mind that the Fed is seeing something very strong, that is just one number and it can change over a day. So I'm not going to put too much into it. So take a look at this. So yen is flat, US dollar, down 0.43. Franc, a little bit of a bump up in the euro as well, but everything else is pretty much flat across the board. The Aussie and the New Zealand dollar are actually kind of just hanging out there a little bit on the weak side, but the Kiwi actually had a little bit more of a bounce than the Aussie did. There's really nothing out there that's giving me an advantage against something else to where I can make a confident or comfortable decision in a trade. Let's take a look at how we finished out. Look, flat on the SPX. We expected a little bit of a pullback or consolidation after the move higher. Once you break out, we either get maybe a day or two up, but more of a consolidation or pullback to the levels that it broke out of. Crypto, on the other hand, is in its own euphoria. Now, folks, this is 100% based on expectations of new political, or I should say possible political outlooks, the excitement and euphoria behind it. So you kind of have to let this go. It was going to hit the 100K and it did. And once you set that line, it's going to get there. Where it goes from here, it's just a little bit too tumultuous and a little bit too unpredictable for me to actually trade. Gold down a little bit, oil as well. Basically in line with the rest of the market. So let's take a look at some of these cryptos. It was Bitcoin Cash that had the big push. Ethereum actually was flat, but Litecoin actually had a pretty good surge to the upside. I really can't gauge anything when it comes to comparing it with something that's weak or strong or understanding or actually gaining any sort of advantage when it comes to responsible trading in cryptos. I'm just going to let them sit for a while. I know you've heard me say that a lot, but that's kind of where we're at. So market outlook is definitely +3. We've got this nice ascending triangle pattern, one of my favorites. It broke out and a little bit of a subsequent retest. Well, I shouldn't say retest, but you get the push-pull. I'll get there in a second. So the 20 MA, 50 MA, 2050 slope is all bullish. So I have to keep it very, very glass half full. So what do I mean by the retest? What I like about ascending triangle patterns, and one of my favorite trades out of these on the equity side, is diagonal spread, something that's time correlated. So I have the advantage of a longer term bullishness with a little bit of shorter term bearishness, saying that it's not going to quite get above a certain level. And this is kind of the push and pull that I'm referring to. Now, when it comes to currencies, it's just set a new high, and then, okay, what do we do here? Is this an area where traders will take profits and maybe retest back to these lines here, these support levels, which the majority will? That's not my straight line, but let me go back here and kind of give you an example. So this was a pretty euphoric move, right? This was based off an event, elections, but it absolutely did come back and test it. So here we are again. It's not breaking out nearly as high because we do not have the velocity behind it. There's no election or outsourced stimulant to really push it that high, but we are floating at that level. Volume stays consistent, so something sideways to up from here. I would not be surprised to see these markets consolidate or even start to retrace over the next few days. So there's not much you can do in this situation except for hold on to what's working, some of the bulls that you might have, or some of the currency pairs that you guys have. If they do take a little bit of a hesitation or corrective action, just believe in the overall pattern itself when it comes to the daily, and try not to listen to the noise when it comes to day to day. So that's kind of where I'm at there. Not a lot to go off between yesterday and today. Let's take a look at what we could expect when it comes to some events. This is the one I'm leaning towards here on Friday. Obviously, tomorrow we got unemployment changes for the CAD, unemployment rate for the CAD, non-farm for the U.S. and unemployment rate. We did get the unemployment claims, and you could see on the U.S. side it did tick up slightly. I think the markets were actually going to consolidate or pull back a little bit regardless, just based on what we did yesterday or actually this week, breaking into new highs. Everything seems to be pretty comfortable when it comes to numbers economically on the U.S. side. So I'm not going to look too deeper in there. And more importantly, folks, we don't need to guess or expect or try to project what we think might happen. We just got to kind of follow along. So let's just jump out and take a look at the currency analysis. Not a lot of difference between what Ankit was talking about yesterday, just a little bit of corrective action, but things are within their range. So let's jump out and take a look. First off, as always, kind of starting out here with the yen. This is our velocity score, and you can see that over the last little bit, it's just kind of petered out. A pretty good move to the upside over the last few days. A little bit of a slope here on the RSI. It is still above the 50, but it looks like it wants to go a little bit lower. We do have some support levels here that are actually being threatened. So I had to just kind of downgrade this thing. I just kind of left it at that -2. I can see the RSI flipped. I can see a flatlining moving average. But the overall slope of the RSI shows it might be weakening. Now, this isn't something that's just going to fall apart. This could be something that might slowly work its way down. So I'm not going to be super aggressively bearish on it. But I am going to keep it down at that -2 because I don't think it's done much from yesterday. Let's move over to the US dollar. And I imagine the majority of the weakness was probably a little bit of worry of the uptick in the unemployment claims. Yeah, we'll see where that goes. Not a lot of change, obviously. Well, actually, it was quite a bit of change when it comes to the velocity score. But I want you guys to kind of focus on the overall trend of this. Now, this was a pretty good drop from yesterday to today. This is a pretty good slope down on the RSI. It actually broke below the 50 and a flip on the SAR. So, I mean, it's easy for me to say -1, -2. And I'm going to call this flat, right? So -2. Understand that the US dollar yesterday was at a +1, right? A nice little move to the upside. We flipped the SARs. We had a good move on the RSI. So it just tells you how tumultuous these markets can be. What I want you to focus on, and I can't say this enough, is these ranges, this area, and I call this meandering. It's above, it's below, it's sitting a high, it's sitting a low in its range, its respective range. There's really not much to be made out of this versus what you decide to make out of it. And where it gets dangerous is if we project kind of what we think or feel the market or the currency should do. So let me go to the daily chart on this. And this does not look like a -2, does it? But it is on the velocity score. It's on the velocity score because, here we are at a +1. Here we are at a -2, right? But overall, the US dollar is still pretty strong. It's holding in there. Yeah, sure, I can see some weakening on the RSI. There might be some instability based on some of the numbers, but overall, as far as the overall, I can't say overall enough. The currency itself is what we got to focus on in the longer term. Sometimes the relative strength can be misleading. Let me go back to it here. I'll zoom in and bring it down. And it looks like this thing's about to roll over and fall apart. Okay, we went from a +1 to a -2. It's just the velocity of a very volatile situation that the US is in. Keep that in mind when you're trying to compare these. Let's jump straight over to the euro. Here it is. This is the euro. This actually moved up a little bit in my mind. I liked it. What I liked is it kind of consolidated through this area. The RSI is above 50. It's floating a little higher. It's up in this higher range. Good move to the upside. Flip the SAR, and we have a pretty decent looking moving average, and I like that. Now, there is some resistance here, so I'm going to be super patient with it. I'll say it again, folks. Today really didn't really give me an advantage or anything I could really go off of because it was just kind of opposite what we saw yesterday. But I can take a look at this and keep an eye on it to see if this is going to continue. I like this higher high here. I like if this can kind of move higher. Maybe we can get a little bit of a surge or an emergence of the euro. I'd pair it against something a little bit weaker, at least in the shorter term. So I'm going to keep that euro there, bump it up to a +2. Taking a look at the franc. The franc is also showing some strength. Nice little ascending highs, right? So we have this little pivot point here, a pivot point there. Flip the SARs. RSI is staying comfortably above that 50 and move to the upside. Good candlestick range, and it's actually in the same situation as the euro, very similar. I like it. This could be an emerger. This one actually is a +3 just because of the last move it had. I believe we had it at a +2 yesterday. But, I just love how this turned real good here on the moving average. The SAR stayed, and this move on the RSI just shows there's probably a little bit more velocity in this over the next couple of days. So if you're looking for the shorter term, the franc looks pretty strong. Let's move over to the pound, and the pound is a little similar situation. I hate to punish things for pullbacks or corrective actions. So in fact, I didn't. We have a little bit of a drop here on the RSI, but this pullback is very comfortable. You can see it's well above that 50 mark. The SARs are still flipped, looking good, and the moving average is great. This also had a pretty decent, look at this little consolidation area, or more of a consolidation than it is even a pullback. Moving higher, and it looks like it's kind of retested. So if it can hold this area here, this might be something that we can also see strengthening or at least showing some stability into the future. Moving on down the line, let's get to the CAD. Now the CAD does have employment numbers along with the US as well, and the CAD has been pretty much flat. I kept this at a 0. It's just consolidating. Sometimes we just don't want to make anything out of anything, right? So you can see in this square that I've got, you can see flip-flop SARs. You can see highs, lows, some a little higher, but the lows are pretty consistent, and a really tight consolidation as of late. Take a look at the RSI here. We got a nice little consolidation at about the 50. I kept it as 0. You can call it -1. CAD is something that I'm just going to stay away from. It's really not going to give me an advantage in either direction. So I'm just going to kind of set it aside for my pairings. Let's go to the risk-on currencies. Let's take a look at the Aussie and the Kiwi. Aussie first. Aussie does look weak here. A little bit of a bounce today when it comes to momentum. I'm not going to look too deep into it. If I see something break these levels with a little bit more of a move or a little bit more surge, I'm great. I'm fine with that. This has been out, or I should say under the RSI for quite some time, below the SARs. Look at this trend. Let me get a line here, but the trend has just been pretty consistently weak for a while. So if I'm looking to pair anything against an emerger, like the US dollar or even the yen, if the yen can continue to show some strength, it seems like I'm seeing a risk on move come off. So I'm seeing a little bit of money coming out of the Aussie and the Kiwi and going back into maybe the yen and the US dollar. So if that continues, then that's a pretty good pairing. Let's take a look at the Kiwi itself. You'll see that it's actually a little bit stronger. It's got a little bit more of a momentum to the upside, but I'm not going to overly score it. So instead of a -2 like I have the Aussie, I kept it at a -1. And I believe the only reason I did that is because it has a little bit of an emergence here. And if it could do a small ascending triangle and maybe get back up to this area, I might treat it a little bit more bullish, but I could see this kind of just peter out here and roll back down. The RSI slope is optimistic, but it's still below that 50, the flip on the SAR. But this is, the moving average has been down and is kind of flattening itself out, so I really couldn't get too excited about it. So I just bumped it up to a -1. So here's my score. Basically, for today, not a lot has changed. A little bit, some slid down, some slid up. Not that big of a deal. Now, folks, I didn't go through the currencies, or excuse me, the cryptocurrencies, because they're just in corrective actions or pullbacks. They are definitely +3, +2s. They're all over the place. If you're patient with them, let them correct or consolidate. And I would play these only on breakouts or pivot points to the upside. Past that, I mean, euphoria is tough to trade because it literally is the truest statement of gambling that I can think of. So let's take a look at some possible trades when it comes to what we have. Taking into consideration, I'm just going to put the cryptos to the side, but there's only a couple I really want to look at. So let's take a look at them. So the first, I'm just going to take a look at the risk on trades coming off, right? So I want to see the weakness in that Aussie, if it's going to continue to kind of meander around with what I've seen in the franc, kind of a little bit moving higher. I know that the franc's got a lot of news behind it, but I'm just here to make the trades. So what I like is a little bit of a rollover here showing that it's pushing a little bit lower. Yeah, it might consolidate here, but I like the RSI. So short that Aussie franc looks pretty good. But if you take a look at the daily chart on this, it's got a little bit more meat on the bone. And what I like is if it can break this level, which it looks like it's about to, my first target's going to be down here at the 0.5615 right area. So I imagine it'll get there pretty quick, unless these markets decide to go flip-flop. But that's kind of one on my list. Obviously, if you guys are going to trade this on the momentum side, make sure that you snap the fibos or have a target on it. It's a retracing a little bit, which does give us a little bit of a line in the sand if you want to be a little bit more, what's the word, risk adverse. Just wait for this to actually roll over and break some of these lows. It might do it this, over, I should say, outside of the U.S. market, but if it can continue to show that momentum. So I like that. It's nothing I'm super excited about. I'm just kind of putting things together because days like this are very difficult for me to make trades on because it's just a reaction to what we saw yesterday. Like I say, meandering is the word. The other one I like is the pound Aussie. It's very similar in, hey, obviously you're going to go up to down, but I like it. It's retracing a little bit. What I thought was kind of cool is I'm not taking the super strong versus the super weak. What I'm taking is emergence. I'm taking a currency that's actually getting weaker versus one that I'm seeing getting stronger. And I'm just going to try to play it. Now, it is an anticipation, but it can be followed. I like this high base that's going up here. I'm very confident, or I should say confident, but I'm comfortable letting it just kind of meander and play around here on the velocity score. But once it starts to really push through the 1.98, something up in this area, I'm fine throwing a couple of bucks at it. This could be something you can scale into as well. I mean, this RSI definitely looks like it's a little tired. It might want to consolidate. And to tell you the truth, folks, the longer this consolidates, the better. For me, it is. It's going to be, I just feel a little bit more comfortable when the currency price can kind of take a rest before it pushes the upside. But that's it. I mean, there's nothing out there that's really amazing that I just have to get into. I'm just kind of waiting, and I'm going to see if things can continue to stay weak and strong. Past that, it's just flip-flop. There's not a lot I can make out of that. So in conclusion, folks, currencies are just meandering. And the word meandering means it's kind of going up and down with really no clear direction. But they're staying within respective levels. So even though I see weakness in one currency and strength in the other, they're really not busting out of anything too big on the daily charts. Yes, the velocities are changing. There's a lot to kind of pay attention to. I do like the franc on the velocity showing some strength. But on the daily, it's whatever. The Aussie's breaking down. It looks like it's falling apart on the momentum side, but overall on the daily, it's still got, it's still within its respective level. So let's not make mountains out of molehills. Crypto continues its euphoric surge. Folks, I truly believe it's the focus right now, and it's the hot topic, and it's going to go nuts. So at your own risk, just make sure you don't put too much money in it because it is an absolute freeway that you're trying to walk across. Play relative strength and weakness, and right now I've just got a good surge out of the U.S. markets, and I saw a lot of these currencies follow along with it, and then we got some corrective action. So let's just see what happens and what emerges. Be careful with whatever you do. Make sure you're always properly position sizing, even if you want to go ahead and throw a dart. All right, folks, thanks for joining me, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.